Hey guys, what's up? It's Pat in the Hat, and today we are hitting the long-awaited video and long-awaited topic, the Growth Hacker's Guide to Forge of Empires. And this is a walkthrough about great buildings and ages and all of the stuff in between. Now, I'm going to warn you straight up front that there is going to be a lot of blah 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 in this video, so you may want to watch it at 1.5 or 2x speed to get through it, but I promise you it is definitely worth it. Do not skip this video because there's so much background and so much context that's added, and you will miss out if you do not watch this video and get everything that's built into this. It just sets the stage for the future videos of this walkthrough. Okay, so the first thing that I just wanted to bring up is the name, the Growth Hacker's Guide. Now, growth hacking sounds like kind of a strange thing, and it's actually a term that comes from the industry that I do in real life, which is marketing. My wife and I have a marketing company, and growth hacking is basically this concept or this approach of growing a business or growing something using effective means with a small budget. So basically the idea being that by using data and being creative, you grow faster than your competitors who are throwing more money at things or throwing more time and they're using more resources. And what we did is we applied the ideas and principles of growth hacking that we use in our real world business and a real world life to the game. And we figured out how can we grow our cities in the most effective way possible. So as you're listening to this guide and you're seeing how it's working, keep in mind that some of the things that we're thinking about is how can we reduce waste and maximize our efficiency and motion, so to speak. So this guide is not necessarily designed for people who spend diamonds. In fact, if you either don't buy diamonds or you don't spend a lot of money on diamonds, say you have a small budget, you spend 10 or 20 bucks on average per month on diamonds, then this guide is going to be extremely helpful to you. Now, if you spend a ton of money on diamonds, then there are certain recommendations that may not necessarily match up because by having a bunch of diamond buildings, those buildings cover a lot of extra space at once, and they cover multiple things at once. So you may not have to go as far in one direction or the other to be effective and to grow your city effectively. But this is not a guide for people who spend a ton of money on diamonds. This is a guide for your everyday average Joe who is looking to grow their city as quickly as possible. All right, so the next thing to know about this guide is that I'm designing it to be evergreen. And what I mean by evergreen is that I don't want it to get dated. Anybody who's watched some of my previous videos know that I'm a huge fan of the Lord of War advanced guide, and that is one of the absolute best guides for Forge of Empires. If you haven't searched up the Lord of War guide, definitely do so because there's some really amazing stuff about the mechanics of the game. Just search LOW Advanced Guide Forge of Empires in Google. It'll be like the first result. It's a forum post. And it's a great guide, but the one thing that really is a bummer about it is that it's a little bit dated because some of the recommendations and all of that have not taken into account all of the changes that have happened in the last 3 years. Now, I started playing in August of 2017, and there have been a ton of changes that have happened. First of all, we've got Guild Battlegrounds. That's new. GE upgrades are brand new. They just came out this week. A level 2 terrace farm, level 2 skywatches. You've got your shrinking fountain of youth. Those things are a major bump in power for those things. I mean, I can't even imagine being in like EMA or HMA and having a building that's producing 12 forge points that in theory I could get in 1 week of GE. Like literally the amount of forge points that you're producing on a daily basis could go up by 12 points if you have a really lucky GE. And when I started, that was just completely out of the question. The antique dealer, right? The antique dealer is a completely, I mean, that totally changes things as well. It was a really big change. So, and then just in general, power creep has changed a lot since, the settlements too. That's the other thing. Settlements were new since I started in 2017. So in a 3-year period of time, this game has added so many features that allow you to grow faster. And what I call that is power creep. if you've played other video games before, or card games or things like that, you've probably heard of power creep. And that's basically that items in the game and things in the game accelerate in how powerful they are more quickly. And that's basically just to keep people moving forward, right? I mean, if nothing got better and better, then there would be no incentive for players to upgrade their city and spend diamonds and things like that. So just a couple of quick examples of power creep and what that looks like in the real world. I'm going to use the fall event of 2017. So this was like the first event that I did when I started playing. And I remember that the Bountiful Cider Mill was the top prize of that event. And this thing gave you 3 forge points every 24 hours, and it was a 15 square building, right? So that's basically 1 forge point per 5 squares. Now, at the time, that was just kick ass, and we were totally stoked about it. Now, this is an archaic piece of garbage that most people would never put in their city once they're a developed player. Now, that's not to say that it's a bad thing as you're getting started off, but a developed player would never have this in their city. This would be considered like bottom of the barrel. When this came out, it was freaking awesome. The next example of power creep, just to sort of give some perspective, I'm going to use the ship. Like this was the event piece from the 2018 summer, and the pirate ship was like, whoa, that is so kick-ass. You got 4 forge points, you got 8% attack. Attack buildings were not that common at the time, so this was like huge, and it gave population. So for people like me who are barrack happy, this was really awesome, and I was totally excited about it. So this upcoming event that's starting any time now, actually I think it starts in like 2 or 3 days, is the summer of 2020 event. And this Governor's Villa gives you in slightly, it's a little bit less than double the space. You get double the forge points, you get 4 units, you get more goods, and then you get a freaking crazy amount of attack. I mean, starting in Oceanic and going up, you're getting more than 1 attack per square. Okay, so this thing compared to this thing, this looks like garbage compared to this. So that's like, if you hear me say power creep, that's what I'm talking about, power creep. The buildings have gotten better, all that stuff is better. Okay, so why is that important? Why do you care? Well, first of all, power creep allows players to go from a brand new city to a future much faster. It also makes it so that players can level their great buildings significantly faster than when I started. Now, that's a benefit both to you as a player, you can level your buildings faster, but it also means that other players are leveling their buildings faster. So that gives you a lot more opportunities to snipe buildings and to make forge points by investing and taking advantage of your arc bonus. So if you're not familiar with arc bonus and sniping and all that, I've got videos on that. Look for 1.9, look for my video on how to make a ton of forge points, because you can learn more about that. But that's really a big thing. And the other thing is that for power creep, it's kind of made it so that straight forge point per square is no longer king. That was a really big deal at one point, and now that's kind of becoming less and less of an important metric of the development of your city. Okay, hey guys, like I know most of you, anybody who's watching my channel knows that I don't script things. I don't even do notes. I actually have notes for this because I want this thing to be so thorough and complete. So if you hear me pause for a second, I might be catching up on my notes, and I'm going to include these notes, so you can a link to these notes in the description, so you can check my notes, check my spreadsheets, all that. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so the other thing that's happened are there's some major game-changing mechanics. And to give a couple of examples of what I mean by game-changing mechanics, and again, let me tie this back. This guide is meant to be evergreen. I want you to be able to go through this guide and it to give you everything that you need, even a year from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now. I don't want you to look at this guide and think, man, this is dated. I want you to be able to take this guide and say, hey, that was several years ago and the buildings are better now, but the things that I learned still apply. All right. So game-changing mechanics are the type of thing that would change aspects of this guide. Some examples of game-changing mechanics would be the arc. The arc broke everything. Before the arc, swap threads were the best way to level. That's no longer optimal. Forge point per square was a huge huge thing that was super important. Now, because you can snipe with arcs and you can make so many forge points by investing, you don't have to make as many forge points in your city collection because you can just snipe to make a ton of points. Goods for your treasury became significantly more sustainable and easier to create and collect. Now, Battlegrounds has kind of messed with that a little bit, but that's a total another tangent. The point is that at the time, it totally changed, and you don't have to have goods buildings or observatory or atomium to get goods into your treasury. And then also paired with Chateau, being able to do recurring quests, that totally broke goods productions once the Arc came out. So there were some really big changes to that. That's one example. Another example is the Tavern. Now, when I started playing, the Tavern already existed, so it wasn't, to me, I didn't really appreciate it. But as I started learning more about the history of the game and where I came from, this extra turn was actually freaking groundbreaking. And I'll tell you why. Before, level 4 of Guild Expedition was not really accessible for anyone except for people who spent a ton of diamonds or people who were totally decked out in their city, which coincidentally also typically tended to be people who had a bunch of diamonds, but not always. The point being is that access to terrace farms and sacred skywatches and all the really great rewards that you get from Guild Expedition were really exclusive. And now, because of that extra turn from the Tavern, anyone can do a level 4 Guild Expedition. Like, it is so easy to do now. So that totally changed a lot of the dynamics of the game, which is really important. Another example is auto battling from the main screen in GVG. Like before, in order to fight, you would have to go in and then you would have to do attack and then you would have to do the fight. Being able to auto battle from the main screen totally changed the dynamics of GVG for several reasons. First of all, it changed what the best units were, and a good example of that is in Contemporary. In Contemporary, in the past, AAVs were awesome because you would go in and then you would skip the first turn and auto battle and then you would win, right? Well, now that's too slow. That takes too long. You have to be able to auto battle from the main screen. And if you use one AAV and 7 rogues and you auto battle into an 8 contemporary tank defensive army, you're going to lose. Your main unit runs out, it gets killed, and then your rogues die, and then you lose. So it totally changed that. And it also made it so that well-developed fighters could really differentiate themselves from less developed fighters. What I mean by that is if you were a player that didn't take a whole lot of damage on fights and you could do a bunch of fights in a row without having to switch out units, that really gave you a huge speed advantage over players that weren't as developed and they couldn't do as many fights between switching out units. Now, when you went into fights and you skip a turn and then fight, that took long enough that there wasn't as big of a time difference. But now with the new being able to fight, and at this point it's not new. I mean, it's a couple years old, but it was it changed things. The other thing that it did was it caused excessive lag on the servers. When GVG was created, you couldn't auto battle from the map screen, so there wasn't as much demand on the server. Well, when you have 10 or 20 fighters from one side and 10 or 20 fighters from the other side, all hitting the same sector at the same time, it's a freaking catastrophe for server processing, and it causes all kinds of lag. And that was not an issue before auto battling from the map screen was a thing. So, and then the last thing, as far as like a game-changing mechanic, is Battlegrounds. Battlegrounds was a huge change because, first of all, it got mobile players way more involved in the game and allowed them to be more involved in daily combat and the ranking of the guild overall. And then the other thing is it gave players a way to convert their fighting into forge points. GVG doesn't give you forge points, but Battlegrounds does. So it shifted the mindset of a lot of players from, instead of this being rows and rows of terrace farms and shrines of knowledge and things that give forge points, they said, you know what? I can load up with a whole bunch of buildings that give me attack, and then I can go do a crap load of fights in Battlegrounds and get forge points from rewards like that. And in effect, you'd end up making more forge points by fighting more than you would from having having a huge city collection. So that also changed things. So do you see, first of all, this is all that babble I was telling you about. I realize that you're saying, hey, this is supposed to be a walkthrough on the great buildings and the ages and all that. Well, understanding where all this is coming from will help you to make better decisions as you go. So, so yeah, the three really important reasons of things that are important to understand about why these game-changing mechanics are important. There's three things. First is that players and guilds that adapt to new mechanics first have a huge advantage. And this is something we're seeing on our server, and I'm sure it's happened on other servers too. The guilds that figured out how to take advantage of the auto battle from the main screen faster, they had an advantage in GVG. Guilds that figured out strategies and battlegrounds faster, those players started getting forge points faster, and they started developing faster. Those guilds became more desirable to go to, so they were able to recruit better. There were just a lot of advantages. Second of all is that old school thinking that's widely accepted and taught, even by some of the tippy top tier players, is no longer optimal. Swap threads are no longer optimal, right? I mean, you'll get a lot of advice about building your cape early and getting a cape early. Well, the reality is, and I have another video about this, getting a cape too early in the game will actually slow down your progress. Now, as you develop as a player, there's a point where putting in a cape and leveling it is efficient and it makes sense to do. But the old school approach was to get that early on, and that made sense. But now that doesn't make sense. There's too many other alternatives, and the opportunity cost of putting a cape in early is just kills you. So that's another thing. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that the optimal path can and will change over time. And that's why I kind of want to give you a system for making decisions instead of giving you specifics of saying, hey, you need to have an LOA that's level 5 and you need to have a Zeus that's level 10 and blah, 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 right? That's not going to be as helpful as saying, all right, now as you're going, these are, if you need to improve in this area because you're deficient in this area, this is where you need to go, or this is the building you need to build. Or once you reach a point where this isn't a problem, you can delete this building. So, by understanding how kind of all the pieces fit together, it gives you the ability to make decisions. And that's also relevant because everybody who's watching this video is going to be coming from a different spot in the game. Some players are going to be really advanced and far in the game, and other players are going to be just starting. And heck, you could even, two players who are even in the same age could be in a widely different place in the game. So having a video that gives so much let's see, what's the word for it? Gives a broader perspective of things will help. Okay, so now that I've talked about kind of what the approach is for the guide, let's talk a little bit about what to expect. Now, so the first thing is I'm going to be developing this out, but y'all have in the past seen my list of great buildings, and I've had people ask me, actually I've had a couple of different pieces of feedback for this. First of all, there was in my newbie video, tips for newbies or whatever you want to call it, this mistakes newbies made. That's what the video was. I used a bunch of acronyms for this and it didn't make sense. So I redid the spreadsheet, and now you can see that I actually have links to all the, not only the full name, but the actual links to the great buildings so that there's no confusion. And the other question was, are these in the order that you would build them? And I would say approximately yes. This is roughly the order that I would build these. I mean, the observatory will probably put, that kind of changes a little bit. But generally speaking, yes, I would build Ark, then Chateau. Yes, I would build Zeus, and then COA, and so on down the list. Now, the bottom part of this, which is new, is the rough order of great buildings, and I'm going to put some more depth into this, but for right now I'm just going to keep this, I'm just going to show this on screen. I'll circle back in a little bit. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to provide is this post. Now this post, I'll show you kind of to give you perspective. So I made a post way back when for our guild on timeline of my city. So I use City Planner back, when we could use City Planner. This isn't available anymore. Inno kind of took away the rights for City Planner to pull your city. So this isn't nearly as helpful. But as you can see, I used to use this pretty extensively to plan out my city. And you can load people's cities based on the sharing. You come here, you see that the city says it's shared. So you say, you've got the share, you've got this code, you take that code and you enter it into, load shared city, you enter the tag, boom, you can load the city up. So what I did was I posted a bunch of checkpoints in my city and feedback on where I was at and what I would have done differently. Now I'm going to make this document available publicly to everyone, so that it's this one right here. I'll put the link in the description, so that if you want to get ahead of where I'm at in the videos and just kind of get an idea of what's going on, this will help you to do that. So that way you don't have to wait for you impatient folk, and I don't blame you for being impatient. So the next thing is I also am creating the spreadsheet, and I think some of you have seen this. I posted a preview of it. I'm going through each of my save points all the way through, and I'm making notes, different notes about these points. So I've got the great buildings, the level that the great building was at the point of the save, how many goods buildings approximately I had, how many forge points my city made approximately. That's excluding the 24 hours. So obviously if it says 21, then that would be about 45 forge points a day. And that also excludes anything that you would get from doing taverns or rewards. This is pure harvest points, just what you collect from harvesting your city, and not all of the other ways to make forge points. Main racks, meaning anything that's not going to be rogues. Main units could be the champs. It could just be whatever, artillery, fast, whatever your unit is. And then rogue racks, obviously, how many rogue hideouts there are in the thing. And then I also have screenshots here of both the city in the regular view, just so you can kind of see what it looked like, and then the flat version, so that you can see how the road's laid out and how the buildings all touch and whatnot. And I'll dig into this later at another point, but just to kind of give you an idea of all of the stuff that's going to be included as this walkthrough is a multi-part series as it comes out. Okay, next thing. So, and then the last thing that I will be doing and adding and building in is I'll be literally walking through each of these cities that that are saved in my planner, and kind of explaining what looks good in the city, what's not good in the city, and what I would do different now, and what you could be doing if you were in my position. Oh, let's go here. So we'll grab just kind of a random one here. All right. So for example, oh goodness, I got a bunch of stuff. I must have deleted things. That's not a good example. All right. So actually this is on purpose. I can tell that space on purpose. Okay. So I would come through and I would say, all right, looking at this city, here are the things that I like about it. Here are the things I don't like. Like, I don't like that I have all these ritual flames. There's definitely other things that I could be using that would be better. Here I can look and I could say, all right, let's see if we can get these terrace farms upgraded. Obviously, if we can swap out these sky watches, that would be good. There's not a lot of attack buildings, so that's the type of thing I would go through, and I would pick apart the city. I'm not going to do it right now in this particular video. I'll circle back to this later, but that's just to give you an idea of what's coming down the line. Okay, so this video's actually, I was expecting it to be about 30 minutes, and it looks like that's pretty close to where it's going to end up. I've just got a couple more bullet points to hit. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, so the other thing, along with the walkthrough based on my cities, so based on these, the other things that will be included are, one, I will include kind of an optimal age and great building timeline. Now, as of right now, oh my gosh, where am I at? It's this one. As of right now, I have this, and I'll run through this briefly, just a little bit, and then circle back up on the specifics later. So basically, as we're looking through this, the rough order to get great buildings. And I'm basing this off of what I would consider the optimal approach to aging up and whatnot. And based on that, this is the order that I would recommend. One of the big mistakes that I see a lot of players making is I see them rushing to get their fighting buildings up, like a Alcatraz and their CDM, and they have these buildings built when they're in really early ages. And there's a couple of downsides with this, and I'll touch on it on another video. But at a high level, the big downside to focusing on fighting too early and not negotiating your way through GE early is that to get competent at fighting, you have to level a lot of buildings. I mean, realistically, you want to have your Trinity, which would be your Zeus, your COA, and your CDM. You would want each of those to be at level 10, and you'd want your Trask to be at level 10 or going up. That's roughly what you'll need to be able to fight deep into level 4 in early ages. And then as you get into later ages, obviously you're going to need even more attack because the boost is getting higher and whatnot. So it is optimal to negotiate early on because you don't have to dump so many forge points into all these buildings in order to be effective and to get through level 4. And that's also valid as far as battlegrounds too. Realistically, if you're going to be going past like 10 or 15 attrition, you really have to have your attack buildings leveled up a lot. Well, if you took all of the cost to level these buildings up and you dumped them into your arc, you're looking at getting your arc through 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 levels. And truly, the most important thing for progressing through the game quickly is getting your arc to level 80. And anything that draws you away from getting your arc to level 80 quickly is hurting you. And that is why that's why I push some of the fighting buildings a little bit lower down the list compared to what traditional recommendations would be. Doesn't mean that you're wrong. It doesn't mean that you can't do it a different way. This is based on the growth hacking approach, which is basically saying, what is the absolute fastest way I can get to my end goal? And this lineup is going to get you there most quickly. So I will start putting a little bit more on as far as checkpoints regarding what level each of these buildings should be for the age. So like I would say LOA shouldn't be higher than like level 3 or 4 at most. Because you just at that point it's doing all the work it needs to. Same with Zeus and COA. Temple, same thing. All of these can be at like level 3 or 4 before you get your arc, and then you want to party on your arc until it gets to 80. You might take a pit stop along the way. Generally speaking, my approach with the arc is if you run out of blueprints, then you can start working on leveling some of your other buildings while you're waiting to get the rest of the blueprints in for your next level of arc. Otherwise, just funnel everything into arc. Okay. So, and then the other thing along with this that I plan to be doing is giving some specifics about what you should be doing on a per age basis. So today I'm going to do Iron Age because I don't have a save for Iron Age, right? If you look at my spreadsheet here, it's not this one, it's here. My earliest age that I have a screenshot of is EMA. So I'm going to use a live Iron Age city. This is a Iron Age city that I'm going to eventually be using to be farming level 4 of GE. And this is actually a really good picture of kind of a checkpoint of where you should be. So some of the main things that you need to be doing when you're going into Iron Age or while you're in Iron Age. The first is that you want to get an LOA, and that's really important because it makes it so that you don't need as many supply buildings. Supply buildings take up population, they take up space, and especially early on, the amount of supplies you need to run these goods buildings is really high. So LOA does a really nice job of cutting down the amount of supply buildings you need. The other thing that a lot of people don't know, and I actually learned this from the Lord of War guide, is that the boost that you get is based off of like when you have this negative happiness. Well, this percent that you're getting as a bonus is based off of starting at 100 and then going up. So when when we have that 105% from my LOA, but then I have a negative 50% from my happiness, it doesn't I don't go up 150 and then get divided by 50%. It just all adds together and then multiplies at the end. So if I got my LOA up to 200%, then this would show at 155. It wouldn't be 100. It doesn't get cut in half. It only loses the 50% multiplier. I know it might be a little bit confusing, but it's actually really important because it means that you don't need to have as many cultural buildings to keep your happiness up. In fact, you can ignore happiness and just run your LOA and your SMB, because early on you don't happiness doesn't really help you that much for your player score anyway. So it's I realize it's kind of a strange concept, but again, that's actually something I picked up from the Lord of War guide, and if you check that out, they can give you more explanation. Okay, sorry about the cough there. So as we look at this city, there's a few things to point out. First, and like in Iron Age, your two big goals are get your LOA, learn how to do level 4 on a regular basis, and get your freaking tavern upgraded. And that is your top mission. Tips for getting your tavern upgraded is you got to find people who will regularly tavern you. And the best way to do that is to find somebody in your tavern, visit their tavern, and then add everyone in their tavern. Because what this is doing is it's ensuring that all of the people that you are adding to your list are people who are taverning on some sort of regular basis. And then, especially in Iron Age, you're going to have a lot of deadbeats. So then you can start pruning your list by removing people who have no guild, or people who they haven't cleared their tavern and you've been in their tavern for like a week. That's when you know it's time to just delete that person. If you have 80 solid friends on your list, or even 60 or 70, you'll be able to upgrade your tavern all the way to the max really, really quickly. And that is like one of your biggest goals in Iron Age. And then as far as city layout goes, generally speaking, I'm not going to get too far into it. In the total optimal scenario, your town hall is not in the corner. Technically, you are wasting a little bit of road by having your town hall in the corner. But in an early age like this, you're not really losing that much. So I like to just throw the town hall in that top corner. And you can see here that this is a nice, efficient setup. I have the minimal amount of road I can use, right? I'm not running road along the edge of the city. I'm touching on the short side of the longer buildings. So like here, this butcher, I've got a 3 side and a 4 side. The 3 side's what's touching the road. And then the same thing here with the weaving mills. So this is a nice, efficient setup. It could be more. I could cram more stuff in there, but I probably play the city maybe 5 minutes a week or something. So anyhow, so this is a nice little Iron Age city, and there you go. So I guess the last thing I'm going to address in this video, just because it is what I would consider to be one of the most frequently asked questions that I get, and I'm way over 30 minutes. It's going to be like 40 minutes when I'm done, is when should I age up? I get that question all the time in my guild by fans who message me when I'm not in, when I'm on my secondary worlds. When should I age up? So there are 4 questions that I ask, and if the answer is yes to all 4 of these questions, then it's time to age up. 1, can you complete level 4 in GE weekly? If you can't, do not age up. You're not ready. Question number 2, do you have enough goods and forge points starting at about colonial for the forge points, but in the earlier ages, just enough goods for the next age to research you to either the goods buildings that you're boosted for, or for the important barracks that you fight in. And basically what the idea is you just need to be prepared for moving up. You don't want to age up and then find out that you don't have the goods and the forge points you need, and then you get stuck at the beginning of the tech tree. That's no good. So definitely double check on that. I'm going to bring my notes over just so you guys can see where I'm working from. Okay. So the next thing is, do you have forge point buildings in your inventory that give you at least 1 forge point per square or better, and you don't have room to place them, right? And basically what the idea here is that if you have forge point buildings in your inventory and you don't have them in your city, then you are wasting forge points. Like, you could be making more forge points each day. And especially when you're first getting started, that's really important. Now, once you get your arc to level 80, once you get your chateau to level 50 or 60 or something like that, then this isn't quite as important. But especially early on, I see people camping in these early ages trying to get their great buildings up. It's like, you barely make any forge points anyway. Your arc isn't leveled. Like, you don't have any way to make forge points. Get get all those forge point producing buildings in your city as best you can. And then the last thing is, do you have the recommended great buildings? And that kind of goes back over to this one here. You know, it would be really suboptimal if you just start crashing through the ages really fast and you end up and you're in like PME and you don't have a lot of these great buildings. It's not necessary. I mean, technically you can be in PME or whatever and just keep negotiating your way through life. That's that's how some players play the game, and if that's how you play the game, cool. If that's what's fun to you, cool. From an efficiency standpoint, from a growth hacking standpoint, as you start getting into those modern ages, PME, contemporary, all that, you really should have transitioned from negotiating to fighting and be fully fighting, or only negotiating just a handful of encounters at the end of level 4 by the time you're in those, I kind of call them middle ages. I mean, and there's high middle age and all that, but from a timeline standpoint, it's kind of like the middle of the tech. So that's really it. So thank you for sticking with me. If you stuck with me this long, I realize that this is a long video, and I did tell you that I was going to babble quite a bit, but this should give you a good idea of what's coming next. And for my next video, I will begin going through that spreadsheet that I showed you earlier, this walkthrough data. I'll be going through this, and I'll plan out and make sure that I'm not getting a little bit too redundant, because some of these points are pretty close to each other. But I'll probably do one snapshot per age just to discuss where we're at, and to kind of show the timestamps between levels and stuff. Like here, you look at Arc. I mean, it's like super slow going, and then all of a sudden, bam, we jump, 15 levels or so. So yeah, that's also really good for helping to give you an idea of pacing. How long did it take to go from level 9 to level 24? Were you moving at a reasonable pace as a player, or should you be picking up the pace, and so on? All right, so if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful at all, please like, subscribe, share it with your friends. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will catch you with the next video.